This is Kristiana de Leon.
Hello.
And hi. And
Hi.
I will give you a second to
Yeah.
tell people about yourself and what you were doing, what you're running for. And I'm gonna just leave up this link below for anyone who wants to support your campaign.
Yay.
It's bit.ly/KDL, Kristiana de Leon, for LD5. And that's how they could support your campaign. And can you tell us who you are? You don't have to go on forever because I have other questions I want to ask you, but who you are, what you're running for, and why our audience, I guess, might be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you also again for this opportunity. I'm really excited. And, and also, by the way, thank you for what you were doing too for the Association of Secular Elected Officials. I believe it was just over a month ago or about such. And that was really, really great for us. So the Association of Secular Electeds, before I get into myself, is a nonprofit organization that is for elected officials who identify with the secular movement, be they humanists, atheists, free thinkers, however that label kind of rolls for them, and trying to converge that sort of part of our identity with really meaningful policy, whether or not that's traditionally considered part of the secular universe or not. So I wanted to just thank you also for helping our organization with providing funds so that we can create more policy hubs and more opportunities for secular elected officials after the election session. So just wanted to put that in there as well, that Association of Secular Elected Officials can also use some love too. But my name is Kristiana de Leon. I am actually currently serving on the Black Diamond City Council. I have been since 2019. So for those of you who don't know, because it is a small town, Black Diamond is named after coal, and we're in the southeast part of King County, Washington. And my ability to serve came from an opportunity that arose from when I was teaching in the public schools locally. And I decided, after all of the advocacy work I was doing, especially to create more inclusive environments in our schools, that I wanted to take that to the next level by creating more of those kinds of partnerships and programs in my city. So fast forward, because I'm really fast forwarding to now, I won my reelection unopposed this past year. And people in the community were asking, so, there's an open house seat in our state legislature. We would love to see your representation and advocacy continue in Olympia. And I was like, well, I mean, see if it's in the cards. And they made it in the cards for this to be a really, really viable campaign, which is exciting. So I am running for the state legislature, 5th legislative district, as a Democrat. And I'm really excited to be able to do that, especially because I really care about public education as a top priority, as well as because I'm in a small and traditionally more rural but vastly growing town. What that looks like for how our city better implements climate change policies and healthcare access. Since a lot of the conversation still revolves predominantly around more urban communities. So that's a little bit for me.
That's awesome. You said something that I've heard from other friends or acquaintances, which is that you were very passionate about certain causes locally. So you got active locally. You were, and uh, whether it was school board meetings, city council issues, you were always advocating for certain things. And because of that, because you were kind of making a reputation for yourself as someone who was fighting for those causes, they pushed you to run for city council, which you did successfully. And I believe, how long have you been on the city council now in Black Diamond?
Yeah, since the end of 2019, since I was able to unseat an incumbent, and I was able to finish their last month just due to some state state rules.
So it's been about 5 years now. And the fact that they're saying, we like what you're doing on here, we want you to push this to a higher level. So all the advocacy you're doing locally, we could try to do it at a state level too, which is again, I think so many people have this fear of how do you get to that level? And the answer you're giving is, it starts out locally because you care about these issues.
That's right. I mean, so I'm thinking about the long trajectory that took me to being able to serve in public office really came from, well, first off, if you've ever taught high school or middle school, you're already a little bit cracked to begin with. So you might as well just kind of, a little bit of what you're getting into, because sometimes in a lot of cases, politics is kind of like middle school while adulting. But actually, in terms of the advocacy part, I found myself, especially in 2018, being incredibly frustrated with, the news cycle going on, and especially with like the Brett Kavanaugh fiasco. And I remember being really, really upset about how powerless I felt at some of the bigger national and international news cycles. And then I was like, I can also at least help with making sure that we don't have our own local Brett Kavanaughs, which is actually something that came up in a local legislative race. And I got involved and I volunteered. And I saw what happened when we volunteered and we won. We won. Like, that organizing paid off, and it changed the conversation in that region. And that's actually what happened in my community as well. I mean, I'm actually reflecting on the fact that I have been serving in a traditionally more conservative part of the county and the state, because Washington State is not, surprisingly, completely blue. It's really not. And I'm thinking about that. Like, I'm thinking about how we went from caring about something locally and realizing I can at least start uber locally, and then how that can actually send that ripple effect to up the ballot as well. So my city has been able to really avoid, I'd say, a lot of disasters about what would have happened should I have not stepped up and run. Also, like, we would have had a far right militia leader being able to just claim that he represented our city had nobody stepped up and challenged that. So I can't emphasize enough that as overwhelming as the national news cycle is, there's really, really good work to be done locally that can have ripple effects in the opposite direction up.
I think it always upsets me when there are bad candidates, not just bad candidates on the ballot, they have a right to run, but it's when they go unopposed, because it just feels so daunting to beat that sort of person. But when you don't give anyone a choice, what are they going to do?
Right.
What have you learned from being on the other side, from actually sitting on city council for 5 years, that maybe you didn't realize when you were just an advocate trying to get those people to listen to you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, talk about, like, every single year I've been on council has felt like one of my most transformative years in my life. Like, and I know that can sound like hyperbole. I can't emphasize enough, though, how much being able to serve and kind of be able to listen to people, get more involved in the policy, make those community connections. I just think of how every single opportunity I get is a chance for growth. And I know that sounds like kind of vague booking almost, in a sense, but I really think about my 2019 self of being that, the burned out teacher who just really wanted to make sure that we were setting up our communities more for success, to be more welcoming and inclusive, and to create more better environmental policy. I could go into more of that too. But how much I've been able to learn as a result. And I also really I can really attest to how fantastic it was that I had the opportunity to run in a competitive race, which I know sounds a little bit like counterintuitive, but it forced me to really listen to so many different perspectives and people. And I love doorbelling. Like, I'm actually really introverted, but I love the opportunity to get to people's doors and talk policy and hear what's on their mind, because one of the number one things that I tell also candidates when they're running is how important doorbelling is, not just for getting out the vote, but how you keep those stories with you, and it continues to inform what you do in policy. So I guess to kind of answer that, I think of that journey of what I heard and hoped to be doing and what I now get to be doing now. Maybe I have more perspective. Maybe things didn't always turn out the way we wanted them to, but now I also have more of an understanding of the sausage making too.
Sure. Tell me a little bit about that perspective, because as
Yeah.
someone who's on the advocacy side of things, I know I'm very stubborn in that regard, that to me, so many issues are black and white. But I also believe that if I were in your shoes as a representative, whether it's city council or state legislature, I would have to put my own beliefs to some extent on the back burner, because I'm not just representing myself anymore. Do you have any stories of times when you felt so strongly about something, but when you were campaigning in a competitive race, or when you were sitting on city council, you heard from somebody who, as an advocate, you probably disagreed with, but now that you're hearing their side of the story, it's like, okay, I do have to represent you, because, I mean, that is literally my job. But this is something that, if I weren't sitting on city council, maybe I would be on the total polar opposite side. I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, I'm thinking of a lot of different perspectives. It does make sense. And I'm kind of one of those people, if people haven't caught yet, I'm one of those folks who does kind of think about like the interconnectedness of issues. So like I'm going in a bunch of different directions with that question already. So very, very locally, I can speak to an issue related to wake surfing on our lake, and how I took one perspective in one sense, and then after hearing from community, I changed my opinion more to make sure that it was responsive to what residents actually said they wanted. So I wasn't just imposing what I thought was the best idea, but really listening to residents and getting more of a consensus on how we share the lake and recreate responsibly. So that's a really hyper local example. But I think maybe what's also relevant to me, but also of course to your audience, is where that then intersects with being a secular elected official and being part of the secular community. So my very short version of how I would speak to my own views as being a humanist and an atheist includes what I think actually really applies to everybody, which is I don't believe that there is any, life after this one. And I really passionately believe about in making sure that everyone has the greatest opportunity for having the greatest quality of life that they can. And so that kind of continues to inform where I kind of set, maybe in a sense, some healthy policy making boundaries. And by that, I mean healthy boundaries, hopefully, for the community. So for example, I draw the line at dehumanizing policies and rhetoric on anti-trans legislation and comments, or, just really bigoted stuff like that. And I also think about what we share in common. And again, even at the higher levels, I think about local issues like, well, we drink from the same water source and we drive the same roads. So I might have serious concerns about some of the dehumanizing aspects of our political rhetoric. And again, that's now national coming local. But guess what? At the end of the day, we're drinking kind of the same water. So maybe even if some of it turns into Kool-Aid, we still have to make sure that we're providing the greatest quality of life for folks, even in the midst of this kind of political environment.